On the 14th of March 1924, an English textile worker named Nellie Kershaw passed away after several years of ill health. During the autopsy which followed, strange, sharp particles of mineral matter were found inside her lungs. Her case was written into medical literature, becoming the very first widely published case of a person dying as a result of exposure to asbestos in their workplace. Nellie Kershaw, however, would not by any means be the last to die from such a cause. Asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral material, generally white and fibrous in appearance. It has many exceedingly useful properties, including being resistant to flame, an excellent thermal and electrical insulator, and resistant to many acids and other chemicals. Its fibrous nature means that it can exhibit all of these properties while also being flexible and easy to work with. This combination of desirable traits has led to asbestos being used extensively throughout history. There is evidence of prehistoric people mixing asbestos fibers into clay cooking pots to strengthen them. In ancient Egypt, asbestos cloth may have been used when mummifying dead bodies in order to better protect them. In ancient Persia, some wealthy citizens owned handkerchiefs woven with asbestos fibers. These were fireproof, and so could be cleaned simply by dropping them into a fire. Any dirt would burn away, but the asbestos cloth would remain undamaged. In the Roman Empire, the wicks of ceremonial candles were made with asbestos. Saturated with oil, the wick would still give a good light, but wouldn't burn away, making the candle last much longer. Blankets woven with asbestos were sometimes used when cremating dead bodies too. Because the blanket would not burn, it would easily separate the ashes of the recently deceased from the ashes of the fire they were cremated on. Roman lawyer and writer Pliny the Younger noticed that many slaves that worked with asbestos became ill, though he was unsure exactly why. This may have been common knowledge at the time, as many people declined to buy slaves that had previously worked at asbestos quarries, believing that they would have short lives. Despite this, asbestos continued to be used throughout the centuries, until the 1800s, when interest in the mineral suddenly increased. Sir William Edmund Logan, a Canadian geologist, displayed samples of asbestos in London, where people were amazed by the versatility and usefulness of the material, and it was soon in great demand. Asbestos was used to make all manner of everyday items, like heat-proof oven gloves and ironing board covers. It was used as a coating to insulate pipes, floors, and walls. It was sprayed onto the interior of train cars for insulation and formed into sheets for the construction of prefabricated buildings. It was used to insulate wires, to make banknotes that could not be burned, to create fireproof uniforms for firefighters, to insulate and protect automobiles, to clad pipes, to create warm and insulating blankets, and for many other things besides. This increased demand for asbestos necessitated greater production. Asbestos was mined all over the world, with some of the largest extractors being Canada, Russia, and Zimbabwe. Factories and facilities all over the world turned raw asbestos into usable products, and the material was ubiquitous in the construction and shipbuilding industries. Asbestos, in short, was everywhere. In the early 1900s, it was noticed that asbestos workers tended to die at a younger age than workers in other industries. In 1906, a London doctor attributed the death of a 33-year-old man directly to asbestos for the first time. In 1924, textile worker Nellie Kershaw passed away after working with asbestos for many years, and notes on her case were published in medical journals in the UK. By this stage, many medical professionals suspected that asbestos was dangerous, although in many cases they were uncertain how. The illness suffered by many factory workers was often referred to as asbestos poisoning. Asbestos didn't poison those who worked with it. Rather, it produced dust which consisted of minuscule fibers that were so fine they could be easily inhaled. Inhaled fibers would lodge in the tissue of the lungs, and the body's natural immune response would cause scar tissue to form around them. As more and more fibers were inhaled, more and more scar tissue would form. As more and more scar tissue formed, the functioning of the lungs would be impaired, leading to coughing, wheezing, and breathing difficulties. Eventually, the scarring would become so severe that the lungs would no longer be functional, and death would result. In addition to this, inhaling asbestos fibers could also lead to an aggressive form of cancer known as mesothelioma. In most cases, those who developed mesothelioma as a result of asbestos inhalation would have only months to live by the time it was discovered. Asbestos was most deadly when inhaled in large quantities or repeatedly. As such, it worst affected those who worked with it in factories or on construction projects. However, the danger also extended to those around them, as asbestos fibers could settle on their clothing and then later be disturbed and inhaled by those close to them. Children, for example, who hugged their parents every day when they returned from work in a factory processing asbestos, often later developed asbestos-related illnesses, even though they themselves had never set foot in the factories. Though the dangers of asbestos were proven quite definitively in the 1950s, the use of asbestos continued in many countries for many years thereafter. The industry was keen to minimize and obscure the dangers of the substance. Asbestos was simply so profitable, linked to so many jobs, and so useful for so many purposes that there was an extreme reluctance to move away from it altogether. To this day, India continues to trade in asbestos, although there is awareness of its dangers and the mining of asbestos is banned. As of 2020, Russia continued to mine and trade asbestos, as did China and Brazil. Materials containing small amounts of asbestos are still used in the United States, although the mining of asbestos in America has been stopped. Canada announced a ban in 2018, with a few exceptions for industries such as nuclear power production. Despite the usefulness of asbestos, though, some countries have achieved a total ban. In the UK, the phasing out of asbestos began in the 1980s and was finally complete with a total ban in 1999. Australia, which once had one of the highest rates of asbestos use in the world, began phasing it out in the 1980s, and achieved a total ban in 2003. Japan also undertook a phased ban on asbestos use, finally achieving a complete ban in 2012. Germany banned asbestos in 1993. But, though asbestos bans are either already in place or planned for the near future in many countries around the world, the problem of asbestos is not likely to disappear anytime soon. Around the world, hundreds of millions of buildings, vehicles, and industrial installations are still filled with asbestos. In many cases, this lingering asbestos is a hidden hazard. If asbestos insulation, for example, is left enclosed and undisturbed, it poses no danger. But when renovations are undertaken, when buildings are demolished, or when there is damage to buildings, dangerous asbestos dust can be released. Safe asbestos removal requires careful control of dust and a huge amount of training and personal protective equipment for the workers involved. As such, it can be an extremely expensive process. This is not to mention the difficulty of determining what parts of a building contain what amounts of asbestos in the first place. Studies have concluded that around 250,000 people each year die prematurely because of exposure to asbestos. In every country where asbestos was widely used, there are thousands of deaths, thousands of cancers, and a huge toll on the healthcare services each year because of asbestos. It is common in most industrialized countries for most people to be exposed to some amount of asbestos dust at some point in their lives. The dangers of asbestos have been suspected since the time of the ancient Romans, and proven since the 1950s. Nonetheless, the material, incredibly useful and versatile as it was continued to be used for decades past the point when it was known to be dangerous. Because of this, and because of how widespread it was, it is likely that asbestos will remain a hazard not just for decades to come, but for centuries.